Okay. I am with Anne Schlafly Cori, daughter of Phyllis Schlafly, grassroots activist, great conservative, worked tirelessly for women and their roles in the home and the traditional family. And I had the great privilege of meeting your mother in 2013 at CPAC in Washington. And I will tell you, I ran across the hotel with a knee brace on to meet her. And I will never forget when I described the conflict I was having as a conservative Christian commentator, writer, with the dirtiness of politics and what I was having to report on. And she looked me in the eye and she said, "Why are you struggling? We must recognize that God gave us the most wonderful land in the world. Save this country from these vultures." And I said, "Yes, ma'am."
That sounds like her.
Save this country from those vultures. There of young women who are not aware of who your mother is or the work that she did tirelessly. So would you describe that for us?
With pleasure, Lydia. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for allowing me to explore this extraordinary life story, because I think my mother's life is worth studying because she was such a role model and mentor to so many women throughout her long career. She was basically active for 70 years. I mean, she really influenced a great number of women. And what the ideals that she presented are that you can achieve. I mean, here she was from a small town in the middle of the country, and she was able to build herself up and create an organization and be a powerhouse and a force for good in conservative politics. Oh, Lydia, did we lose you again? There you are. Are you back?
I'm here.
Okay. Did you miss my statement?
Yes.
So do the whole thing again?
No, let's don't. Just continue. And
no, I mean my answer to your last question.
Okay, that's fine. Yes.
You can go ahead and the answer.
Yes, I did.
Okay. I believe that my mother's life is worth studying because she is an example of how women in America can achieve and do anything they set their mind to do. She never played the victim card, and she was a success because she was optimistic and positive on what she was able to achieve.
Wonderful legacy. Let's discuss how your mother became involved in activism, women's issues, and politics, when it was a time that women were definitely not on the front lines. What's to become involved?
Well, she started to get involved in the political situation in the United States during the 1950s, when she saw the threat of communism and the Soviet Union. At that time, this was life and death for the future of the United States of America, because we had a threat of the Soviet Union, who wanted world domination and wanted to destroy the United States. I mean, after all, their premier said, "We will bury you." And my mother was extremely active in trying to educate people on the perils of communism. And you know, communism hasn't gone away. We're still talking about socialism and communism today.
Absolutely. Because another thing about your mother is the way that she was absolutely able to balance her faith, home, and politics. How did she find that balance?
Well, first and fundamentally, it came from her faith. Her faith was central to all decisions that she made throughout her life. And she never wavered from her faith. Her faith, formed the positions that she would take on issues, and her strong faith and it was the basis of her life, and it was also the refuge for her. I mean, frequently my mother was asked, how could you be so resilient, and how can you continue to the work that you do and be happy about it? And it was her faith, because she was so confident in her faith.
Just amazing. When your mother decided to step into the fray with the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment, she single-handedly led this revolution of housewives to defeat it. It had been ratified 37 states, is that correct? Before she was able to organize the opposition to it?
Well, the Equal Rights Amendment was passed by both houses of Congress in 1972 and then sent to the states for ratification. And at the time, it was seen as a sure thing, because equal rights, who can be against that? So it took some time for my mother to explain and present the ramifications of the issues. And because, the harms that would actually happen to women is what she devoted her time to. So it passed 35 states by 1977, but it had really slowed down because state after state had continually rejected ratification, and they rejected it because my mother educated and trained women who volunteered to get out of their homes and go to their state legislatures and lobby their legislators on this issue. So she discovered a group of people who had never been active in politics before and became active when they found this threat that would happen to their lives. And they were passionate enough about it to volunteer to lobby. And that's why it had such a huge effect. She created the pro-family movement. She created this idea that church-going people shouldn't just go to church, but should participate in the political sphere, and so that their issues could be heard. And I think for many of these people, when they started to vote in the 1970s, they had never voted before.
Well, why was she so strongly opposed to the ERA, and not only to the ERA, also this movement, the national organization?
What the Equal Rights Amendment would do would be to make men and women interchangeable in every situation. And the interchangeability would mean a completely sex-neutral society. And if men and women are interchangeable in every situation, women lose, because there are plenty of laws and customs that are designed for the benefit of women. And there, for example, to take a more contemporary example that would happen if ERA were to be ratified today, would be making prisons sex neutral. Now, women lose in that kind of situation. And so my mother saw the harms that could happen if we took away all of these protections, because in the end, men and women are biologically different.
Now, on April 15th, Hulu and Fox have produced and are going to be live a series titled Mrs. America, starring Cate Blanchett, who is also executive producer, based on your mother's life. Cate Blanchett stated, in this series, it is the character of Alice who turns Phyllis on to what she thought were the dangers of the ERA, that women could be drafted. She thought it would delude the military of its strength. And then she started to forge a link in her mind between the ERA and communism. The impact of the military is why Phyllis got involved. So did Phyllis see a connection between the passage of ERA and communism?
Well, first of all, it's important to note that the Mrs. America story that's going to be on TV is fiction. They've made it up. This character of Sarah is a made up character. She's completely fictional. And so that's how they're driving the arc of their agenda is
Like Sarah Paulson is playing this character named Alice.
Yes.
Based on a next door neighbor.
So, which is made up, fictional. It didn't happen. And so they have their mission to drive it. Now, my mother was always interested in the American military and the strength of the American military to protect the United States. What she saw in the Equal Rights Amendment is that it would compel women to be drafted and compel women to be in the combat front lines. And that would weaken our military forces because after all, there's no army that the United States is going to fight where they have women in the front lines.
I'm going to also read you some more quotes from some of the reviews from opinions of reviewers that have been published, if you don't mind answering them, because there is such a misconception and such a skewed view of your mother being presented in this document or this series. Cate Blanchett also said in a panel interview, how polarizing she became is the very thing that kept her from getting a spot in President Reagan's cabinet. How would you respond to that?
Well, I'm not sure my mother actually wanted a spot in Reagan's cabinet because I believe that my mother was more powerful from her independent position. Now, there's no question that when Reagan won, there's always excitement about going to Washington and becoming a part of the administration. And I think she briefly flirted with the idea, but she ended up just setting up an office in Washington so she could monitor, lobby, and influence. And that was a better position.
Well, I'm excited to be able to read these quotes from the stars so that you can set the record and say this is fiction.
Thank you, Brittany.
So another panel is about justice. So I think it's a very interesting thing to ask. What's so terrifying about the notion of equality and how we view the Constitution?
Well, there's nothing terrifying about equality. You just want to understand the ramifications. Now, under the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, all persons have equality of opportunity. We have that today, and that's been well recognized, and my mother used that as an argument. But ERA would have mandated equality of outcome, and that becomes a very different situation. Even Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Justice on the Supreme Court, who favors ERA, said that true equality means women and men in equal numbers in the combat front lines. So, there's no benefit to women anywhere for that kind of outcome.
From another interview, the series creator and writer, Davy Walter said, Ms. America is an origin story of today's cultural wars. I thought that was an interesting statement. They consider from 50 years later that is the origin of today's culture wars. How would you answer that? Or how would your mother have answered that?
Well, we certainly had feminism in the 1970s, and we have feminism today. I think some of the feminists in the 1970s were actually very strong, powerful women who had an agenda. But today, what I see in some of the younger feminists of today is more whiny and victimhood. I think the feminism has changed to be more complaining about the role, about society, and blaming others for things that haven't happened. And you see, that idea of victimhood is what my mother rallied against. And anytime that you say that women can't achieve, you're really holding women back. I do believe, as Phyllis Schlafly believed, that women can do anything they want to do and achieve anything they want to do. It's just always of whether you want to put your mind to it and make it happen. Because after all, my mother achieved a tremendous amount, and she didn't start with anything in order to achieve it. And nor did she ever ask for federal government help in trying to get her ideas along the way. She was able to do it on her own. On her own because of her tremendous fortitude in doing it, but she also was able to do it because she recognized that what helps women and makes life so much nicer is a good marriage. And she had a great marriage, and a big reason why she was able to have the success that she had is because she was married to Fred Schlafly, who was fully supportive emotionally, intellectually, financially, and spiritually. And my mother, part of her philosophy was to say to women, marriage is a great deal for women, a good deal. And so don't try don't say you don't want it. I mean, after all, in the 70s, there was that line, a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. You know, where does that get you? Because it's better to have two of you than one of you.
Absolutely. And I know that, and I have read some reviews, and I won't go into all of the different scenes that are quoted in this Hulu series, but it does not paint a favorable portrait of your mom and dad's marriage. So I'm so glad that you pressed that.
And I think it's important to point this out. I have not seen it, but I've talked to two reporters who've told me that there's a scene where my father rapes my mother.
Yes.
Now, I understand they want to defame Phyllis Schlafly, but why do they want to defame Fred Schlafly? He was an honorable man, and he loved, and they had a great marriage, and he loved and supported everything that she did. And to paint him with this awful characteristic is terrible, because it really slurs Fred Schlafly and his tremendous life that he had. You know, he used to say, I regret that I have but one wife to give to my country.
Oh, that's great. And, you know, that was such an unusual situation in that time, you know, where the man and the wife stayed, and for him to be a supporter.
Well, my mother did run for Congress, and she lost. And afterwards, my father he had a lot of wit and humor about him, and the quote that he gave to the newspaper the day after she lost was, my wife supports everybody. My wife thanks everybody who voted for her, and I thank everybody who did not.
That's funny. Well, there was another scene, and I just think it's important to get as many misconceptions before the series.
Yes.
There's another scene where that goes by quickly, but Schlafly Phyllis having to go to her husband's office to ask him to sign for a credit card. That's the kind
I think they made up that scene.
Okay. He said that's the kind of patriarchy that still had a hold on class in 1972. And I do feel that the I think it's horrific. There's another scene where she has made it into the inner circle of the Republican political as part of a meeting with Senator Barry Goldwater, only to be asked to serve as a note taker for the meeting because her handwriting was better. her
Lydia,
anger
I have
out.
to tell you, that's completely made up. I listened to Davi Waller describe it, and she said she had gotten it from the biography of Phyllis Schlafly, Donald Critchlow's book, Phyllis Schlafly and Grassroots Conservatism. She said she got it from a footnote in the book. So last night I read every single footnote in that book, and she has made up that scene. It never happened. So there are two things to remember about it. My mother took voluminous notes. So there are a lot of notes in her handwriting, voluminous notes. But the meeting that is described in the movie, the fictional movie, my mother wasn't at it. My father was at that meeting, not my mother. Now, I had to tell you, I had a friend call me after reading some of these things, and he said he heard a little bit on the radio where the producer called my mother a puppet of the insurance industry. And he said, I ran the car off the road. I was laughing so hard. The idea that your mother could have ever been a puppet of anyone is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I knew her, and it's just not possible. They didn't catch it for her.
Well, you know, again, I'm so happy to be talking to you because of these false representations of not only your, but of your both parents. I have a question that I wanted to ask you, and that was about Eagle Forum. For those that are familiar with Eagle Forum, would you just give a little background and tell us not only how it was founded and also what's the mission, purpose, and what is moving forward is Eagle Forum doing?
Thank you, Lydia. So when ERA was being debated in the early 1970s, there was a loose organization called Stop ERA. And after a couple of years, my mother and her friends realized they needed to make a more formal organization in order to continue this important mission. So in 1975, they founded Eagle Forum. And Eagle Forum is made up of volunteers. I'm a volunteer. My mother was a volunteer. And all these women who worked in the organization did it because they were passionate about the issues. And if you have ever been part of a volunteer organization, you know that the energy that people put in is because they are true blue believers. They believe in the mission, and that's why they're there. ERA is made up of a network of chapters in various states, and these chapters work on minding their legislators within their states. And then we have a national organization which helps be an umbrella supportive for the local chapters. So our national headquarters is in Alton, Illinois, and we also have an office in Washington, D.C., which my mother started in 1981 after Reagan won the White House, because she thought she needed to keep an eye on what was going on in D.C. So we have these two national offices, and then we have all these state chapters where we try to keep bad things from happening and try to promote good things. Obviously, family issues have always been key for Eagle Forum, the defense of the family as the building block of a great society. There are two other legs, what you would call the three-legged stool of traditional conservatism. And the two other legs are a strong military defense and economic freedom. And you need all three for American society to thrive.
That is wonderful. Now, if someone wanted more information, which I know they will, how do they contact you or Eagle Forum if they wanted to more information or to contribute to what you're doing?
EagleForum.org is our website, and you can contribute online. We have a monthly newsletter that we snail mail out on the issues of the day. We also have daily emails, because every day there's something to send out an email on. And I also invite you to join me. This movie is going to be released next Wednesday, April 15th. So we're going to do a Facebook Live watch party where I will make comments, and I want comments from people and have it very interactive. So we have a watch party page on Facebook, and we also set up a website to show the lies of this fictional drama. And the website is mrsamerica.org. And so please, read the truth, because, her life story is quite remarkable and I think worth studying.
I agree. And before, is there anything else that you would like to add? Anything that I've not asked you that you would like to address?
Well, I haven't seen the show yet to know what's out there and what other mischief is going to be. But I hope that this will encourage women to discover Eagle Forum and discover why it is that we present an alternative to this pop culture that Hollywood is trying to present. The American women can have a wonderful life, and we have opportunities are around us, and let's use them.
Well, thank you so much, Anne. It has been such a pleasure to speak with you and such an honor.
Thank you, Lydia, for having me on.